Greetings, casual yet aspiring grammarians. The great philosophers, psychologists, and spiritual teachers always taught not to rush. I hate to rush. When I make videos, I keep looking at the little timer on the phone there, and then I kind of always end up rushing. Anyway, so I have a few leftovers to talk about, so I won't have to rush, and I'll go over them briefly. Now, back when I talked about noun clauses, I focused on the noun complement and the appositive. I talked about that. And the key element in this study of noun clauses was restriction. That was the key word, okay, the key point. I determined that the noun complement really kind of should be restrictive, and the appositive really kind of should be non-restrictive. And of course, that's up for debate, but I made a decision and I stick with it. Okay, so the key word in this situation was restriction. All right. Now, when I talked about distinction phrases and clauses, which ordinarily would be called relative clauses, but I don't call them that. The key word with your distinction clauses, which are indicated by a distinction indicator, okay? The key word in this concept is reference. Reference is very, very important. Of course, you can't have these clauses and phrases without it. So I'd like to show you this because I didn't have time to go over this in detail. Oh, actually, I took from my chart, I took an example of a primary distinction indicator, a referent carrier, and the double distinction indicator, which is the word whose. Okay, so I took one from each of the main categories, right? And I mapped it out. Now, here's an example of the primary distinction indicator. I used the word that, right? And here's a sample sentence. The book that is blue is damaged. So you see what we have here is using this primary distinction indicator, you see that your word book is your given referent. Your given distinction indicator, okay, it's given right up front, clearly visible, is the word that, and that is blue is your given distinction phrase. In other words, in this case, everything is given to you right up front. It's visible, it's clear as can be, okay? Now, with your referent carrier example, I used the word what. Okay, we have a sample sentence here. It's what he desires is absolute power. Okay, so we do a conversion like I taught in my videos. We do a conversion, and what we end up with in the mind is the thing that he desires is absolute power. The thing that he desires is absolute power. So you see here now, we have a derived reference. We pulled it out of here. We have a derived referent, and here we have the converted distinction indicator. We started out with what, and we go to that. All right, we have the converted distinction indicator, and here we have that he desires is your converted distinction clause. That's a distinction clause because you have a little subject and a little predicate, all right? So you see, in the case of the referent carrier, you have a different type of referent and a different type of distinction clause, okay? You see the difference between the two? Now, when you get to the double distinction indicator, that's the word whose, we have another sample sentence, and I'll read that. We prefer neighbors whose children are courteous. Okay? Now, in the mind, we do this whether we like it or not, but we have to kind of figure it out in the mind, and we do all the figuring before we speak, and then we speak. So what we're really kind of saying initially or originally is we prefer neighbors who have children who are courteous. Okay? We prefer neighbors who have children who are courteous. All right? And we see here that we have up front, we have a given referent, right? Neighbors. We have another given referent, children. We have 2, all right, given referents, all right? Then we see we have a converted distinction indicator, right? We started out with whose. It was converted to who, all right? So we have a converted distinction indicator. And over here, whose was also converted to the second who, this who. That's a converted distinction indicator. And then here you have the word have is introduced. Okay, it comes out of here. And you have a derived distinction phrase. It's a distinction phrase because really all you have really here is have, all right? Who have children? Have children is your predicate. And over here, you have another converted distinction phrase, okay? Who are courteous. See, it's a phrase because you have are courteous as a predicate. So you have 2 distinction phrases and 2 referents, and that's what you end up with. So you see clearly, you see 3 different structures. The referents are a little bit different, and the phrases and or distinction clauses are a little bit different. So I hope you understand that. Now getting back to the terms that are used in traditional and even contemporary grammar, they call these things relative clauses, or they call them adjective clauses. I call them distinction phrases and distinction clauses. I think I did such a good job on this without sounding arrogant that someday someone will refer to these clauses by my new terms. I think it's going to happen. I don't know when, but when you get to the point where you say, well, is it really a relative clause, which I went over 100 times, or you say, is it really an adjective clause? An adjective clause is supposed to describe or list or show the qualities of the referent. That's what it's supposed to do. But let me give you this sample sentence here. The wine that she loves is Pio Cesare. That's an actual real wine company. They make excellent wine, probably some of the best wine in all of Italy. Pio Cesare. Okay, so the wine that she loves is Pio Cesare, the Pio Cesare brand. All right, which I've had many times, though I don't drink. I just, I've tasted it, but I'm not a drinker. So anyway, so you see the wine, all right, is Pio Cesare. But when you throw in your distinction clause, which they would used to call an adjective clause, okay, you see that it tells you nothing about the wine. Is it really an adjective? Okay, the clause does not describe the wine. You see, the clause, you could say, yeah, that's a relative clause, or that's an adjective clause, because that's what they call it. That's what teachers tell little children. But it doesn't describe or modify the wine. It just lets you know that, yeah, she really loves it. It says nothing about the wine. Does it make a distinction? Sure. It certainly does. It's the one she loves. It's very, very clear. So that's why I don't use the term relative clause or even relating clause, and I don't use adjective clause, because you see, here's an example of how you can have a so-called adjective clause, and it tells you nothing about the referent. Sure, she can love it, she can take it to bed with her, and she can buy a bottle for all of her friends, but that tells you nothing about the wine, the quality, the bouquet, the taste, the whatever. So there you have it. And I think I failed to make that point previously, and that's it. Okay, well, at least I didn't take forever, I don't think. So thanks for being patient with all my videos, and I hope to see you soon. Good night.